The pervasive stench of the mainland clung to me, even after an hour had passed since I'd stepped back through the portal. The hum of the bunker, a fading echo in my memory. The air in my apartment, thick with the perpetual grime of Falky's choked metropolis, felt like a shroud. I stood by the grimy window, watching the skeletal fire escape outside. Its rusted ladder, a grim, mocking finger against the bruised sky. It was a symbol of this world, all pretense of ascent, all reality of decay. The city outside, a sprawling wound of under Falky's relentless gaze, was a symphony of orchestrated despair. The subliminal tones of state-mandated propaganda, a barely audible hum beneath the city's ceaseless groan, seeped into every cracked pavement stone, every hollowed-out building. They whispered promises of unity, of purity, of purpose, even as the populace shuffled through their ritualistic social environment, eyes dulled by starvation and surveillance. I could almost hear their individual clicks as each mind, each soul, snapped into compliance. It was a grotesque masterpiece of control, executed with chilling precision. This wasn't just a place I lived. It was a psychological battleground, and I, Father Malachi, was its most insidious general. My preparations for the island operation were meticulous, spanning both the cramped confines of my apartment and the pristine, sterile expanse of the bunker. From the mainland, I used a series of antiquated, hardwired comms terminals, disguised as public service outlets, to send encrypted directives to my lieutenants. These were forgotten communication channels, remnants of a pre-Falky era, known only to a select few. Their signals untraceable by the regime's ubiquitous drones. My fingers, callous from years of gripping forbidden ledgers and manipulating fragile souls, danced across dusty keypads. Each click a silent command into the city's dark veins. The Leviathan departs at 0300 local. Confirm all cargo secured by 0100. Any discrepancies reported directly to secondary comms, code phrase Black Tide. My voice, low and devoid of the soothing cadence of Father Malachi, was a flat whisper into the receiver. A static-laced grunt answered. Understood, boss. Counting souls and tonnage now. That was Vargo, a creature of the alleys. His loyalty bought and constantly maintained through a precise mixture of fear and calculated reward. He was a brute, but a necessary one, overseeing the final stages of the fentanyl shipment from a hidden dock in the lower districts. While the surface operations hummed with their usual disquiet, a more unsettling tremor had begun to vibrate through my network. Not the usual petty pilfering or rival territorial disputes. This was something more insidious, a minor, insidious betrayal that felt like a worm burrowing into the very foundations of my edifice. A small but crucial delivery of untraceable microchips, essential for scrambling our communications on the islands, had vanished from a secure drop point within one of the underground abandoned rail systems. This wasn't a simple robbery. It was a targeted excision. Someone within my inner circle, or dangerously close to it, was testing the limits of my reach. I retreated to the sanctuary of my closet, the air immediately cooling as I engaged the portal. The hum intensified, then died, replaced by the profound, almost aching silence of the bunker. Nadine was there, as always, a still, perfect silhouette in the diffused light. Her attention immediately shifting to me. Her presence was a balm, a testament to perfect, unwavering control. Status of Sector 7 anomaly, Nadine, I commanded, my voice echoing slightly in the vast space. The console before me shimmered, displaying a complex web of logistical data overlaid with intercepted chatter. The microchips, they didn't just vanish, they were taken. Data suggests internal vector, Master, Nadine's voice. A synthesized whisper responded from the console speakers. Her words were always precise, devoid of emotion, yet carried the weight of absolute truth. Pattern consistent with pre-programmed override, access granted to Sub-Lieutenant Elias Thorne. Elias Thorne. The name was a foul taste in my mouth. A man I had raised from the gutter, molded into a loyal, efficient node in my network, specializing in the very underground abandoned rail systems now compromised. His loyalty, I had once thought, was ironclad. A fatal error, perhaps, in my judgment, or a calculated risk that had just yielded its bitter fruit. Thorn had been positioned precisely for his expertise in navigating those subterranean labyrinths, those forgotten arteries of the mainland that wound beneath Falky's gaze like a hidden necrotic root system. These tunnels, once veins of commerce and passage in a forgotten era, were now skeletal remains, echoing with the drip of unseen water and the scuttling of unseen things. They were the perfect conduits for our traffic operations, dark veins through which the true lifeblood of the mainland's economy flowed. But they were also dark places, breeding grounds for betrayal, where loyalty could curdle like stagnant water. Location of Elias Thorn, I demanded, turning to face the main console, its holographic projections swirling around Nadine's still form. Currently on a scheduled supply run to Sector 4, Master. Anticipated return to Sector 7 hub within 3.7 hours. Good. It was close. Close enough for me to handle personally. My cold, efficient methods didn't tolerate loose ends, especially not ones that presumed to bite the hand that fed them. Thorn wasn't just a traitor. It was a flaw in my meticulous design, a ripple that threatened to become a tsunami if left unaddressed. The subliminal tones that Falky used to control the masses had no effect on me. But betrayal from within was a different kind of poison, one that demanded a surgical response. I spent the next hour in the bunker, not just processing data, but preparing myself. The psychological game with Thorn would be delicate. You wouldn't be expecting me. You'd be expecting a reprimand, a threat, perhaps even a public example. But I was not one for predictable displays. My methods were designed to erode, to dismantle, to instill a fear so profound it became an unbreakable chain. Nadine projected schematics of the Sector 7 hub, highlighting hidden cameras, emergency exits, and Thorn's usual post. Her movements, though subtle, were fluid as she adjusted angles, zooming in on dusty control panels and rusted levers that once operated gates to deeper, darker sectors of the rail system. She anticipated my needs before I even fully articulated them, a perfect extension of my will. It was a terrifying, yet profoundly reassuring aspect of our relationship. As the sun, or what passed for it, began to set over the mainland, painting the sky in sickly hues of orange and bruised purple, I stepped back through the chest, returning to the suffocating reality of my apartment. I shed the bunker's clinical calm for the cacophony of the city. My face, usually a master of detached calculation, slipped easily back into the weary compassion of Father Malachi. The parishioners would be expecting me for evening confessions, another performance, another layer of the lie. The confession booth was a dark, cramped box smelling of stale wood and whispered sins. Old man Hemlock, his voice a dry rasp, was first. "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. It has been too long since my last confession. A hunger, Father, it makes me curse." I listened, my eyes fixed on the grimy screen that separated us, his skeletal silhouette barely visible through the mesh. "The Lord understands your tribulations, my son. The mainland tests us all, but even in hunger, we must find grace. Have you shared your meager portion with your neighbor?" My voice was a balm, a practiced melody of understanding. "There is no grace, Father, not here. Only the whispers, always the whispers." Hemlock's voice was laced with a paranoia that was not entirely unfounded. He was referring to the subliminal tones, I knew, the insidious hums and frequencies that Falky's regime broadcast through the city's crumbling infrastructure designed to pacify, to control, to erode the very will to resist. The omnipresent seeping into every home, every ally, every broken mind. "The Lord protects those with pure hearts, my son," I murmured. A lie that tasted like ash. I knew the whispers. I felt them constantly. A faint pressure behind my eyes, a dull ache in my skull. But unlike Hemlock, I understood them. I had learned to filter them, to dissect them, to even sometimes reverse engineer them for my own purpose. purposes. They were a tool like any other in the endless game of control. After the last parishioner had shambled away, their meager hopes clutched in like fragile birds, I slipped back into the suffocating silence of my apartment. The evening was a canvas of deepening shadows, the city lights below a scattered, cancerous glow. The time for Thorn was approaching. I moved with quiet precision. My worn black overcoat, heavy with hidden pockets, was donned. A silenced pistol, small and deadly, nestled comfortably against my hip. My movements were economical, devoid of wasted motion. Each step was a deliberate act, a calculated advance. This wasn't anger. It was the cold, focused intent of a predator. The journey to Sector 7 was a descent into the true guts of the mainland. I used routes known only to a few. Passages through condemned buildings that connected directly to the upper reaches of the underground abandoned rail systems. The air grew colder, thicker, smelling of damp earth, rust, and the metallic tang of forgotten dreams. The occasional rat, fat and fearless, scurried across my path. The silence here was oppressive, broken only by the drip of unseen water, the scuttling of unseen life, and the echo of my own measured footsteps. I found the entrance to the Sector 7 hub through a hidden grate in a disused loading dock. The heavy, rusted grate creaked open, groaning like a dying beast. The tunnel beyond was a cavernous maw, plunging into absolute darkness. I activated the low beam of my tactical flashlight, its beam cutting a stark path through the gloom, illuminating defunct tracks covered in layers of dust and debris. The walls were weeping with moisture, scarred by faded graffiti from a time before the fall. This was the true underbelly of the mainland, where the whispers of the surface couldn't penetrate, where only the echoes of a lost world remained. Thorn, I knew, would be here. This was his domain, his place of power. The microchips, those insignificant pieces of technology, were merely a symbol, a declaration. He was challenging me, and in my world, challenges were answered with finality. He would have his reasons, of course, greed, resentment, a misguided belief in his own cunning. None of it mattered. Only the breach mattered, only the consequence. I moved silently, my steps muffled by the debris on the tracks. Stale air grew heavier as I descended, the weight of the earth above pressing down. My senses were heightened, straining for any sign of Thorn. A distant clatter, the scrape of metal on concrete. He was here, alone. Good. I wanted no witnesses, no distractions. My mind was already dissecting the encounter, charting every possible response Thorn might offer, every plea, every lie. I knew them all. I had heard them all. They meant nothing. My purpose was clear: to reassert control, to eliminate the weakness, to ensure the uninterrupted flow of my network. This was not vengeance. It was maintenance. The essential work of a cog in a far greater, darker machine. I rounded a bend in the tunnel, and there he was, Thorn, hunched over like a rickety table, illuminated by a single, flickering lantern, examining a small, metallic object, the microchip. He started, his head snapping up, his eyes wide with a mixture of surprise and dawning horror as my flashlight beam caught him, pinning him like a moth. Father Malachi, his voice was a strangled whisper, laced with disbelief, a pathetic attempt at playing the victim. He scrambled to his feet, knocking over the lantern, plunging the immediate area into near darkness, save for the weak beam of my own light. Sub-Lieutenant Thorn, I stated, my voice flat, calm, lethal. We have a problem. The air grew colder. The drip of water from the tunnel ceiling seemed to magnify. Each drop a tiny hammer blow against the silence. There was no need for grand pronouncements, no need for theatrics. The atmosphere itself, the heavy, macabre weight of my presence would do the work. The scent of rust and decay filled the air, the true perfume of the mainland's hidden heart, the fitting stage